So, good evening, everyone, and welcome to Polished Professionalism. This is one of my favorite courses to teach because I think it introduces you to a body of knowledge that has the potential to transform your relationship with work. It has the potential to elevate you to new realms of success. And it really is the kind of things that people don't really tell you if you're doing it wrong. So, Polished Professionalism, this virtual course is a three-part series that I'm going to be teaching to really help you acquire the polish of world-class professionals. I see from the backgrounds of many of you that have registered that you're in the corporate world. Some of you are business owners, some of you are in between opportunities, and some of you have realized that you've made certain mistakes in times past and you're ready to sin no more. So, whatever has drawn you here today, I do want to say thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to serve you. Thank you for the opportunity to teach these certified courses that I have undergone training in from the Protocol School of Washington. I studied at Protocol School of Washington in 2013, and they are the world's leader in image and protocol and business etiquette, intercultural communications as well. And when I studied there, I was driven by one thing. I had this notion, I'm a Christian and my faith, is in the Word of God, and really realizing that I was receiving all of these prophetic words anytime that I fasted or prayed. Sometimes I would dream myself about, interacting with presidents and, having influence and being a person of immense impact in the fields of business and politics and governance. And, the more I was being told that this is what my future holds, the more I started to feel inadequate, that I'm not ready. I don't come from a wealthy family. I don't have, access to, a lot of means. And so at the time I was receiving these directions, I felt so ill prepared for this journey. But one of the things that I know from my mentors who have poured into my life over the years is that what you don't know, you can know. And what you don't get naturally, you can get by learning. And so I started to search vigorously. Where does one go to learn things about like how to behave yourself when you're in a very formal environment? Where does one go when feel, out of your depth? And I don't know about you, but I used to go to events and dinners and things, and there's all of this cutlery and all of these cups and glasses, and I didn't really know how to put them to use. And I just got tired of feeling that way. And so I started to search, and, thankfully I found Protocol School of Washington, and I didn't have the money to take the course at the time. And that's a long story, but, when there's a will, there's a way, they say. So I did study there in 2013, and I was blown away by all of the things that I needed to know that I didn't know. And I was also blown away by the fact that many of the things that I thought were right because they were by Ghanaian standards okay to do were actually misbehaviors that I was practicing on the world stage. So, for example, I had the opportunity, one of the first boards that I served on was a board for the World Economic Forum. And for those of you who know the World Economic Forum, you might know that that's a platform where lots of presidents go to. And so every year, twice a year, they would fly me into Switzerland, and I would go either to Davos for the annual meeting of the World Economic Forum, or I'd go to Geneva for this, what they call the summer Davos. And in the annual meeting, the big one, where all the presidents and heads of state and world leaders come to, I had the opportunity to have an audience with one world leader who will remain unnamed. And as I was being introduced to this president, I, shook his hand, and to my own personal horror, I snapped his fingers. And that's very common. We do that in Ghana. We shake hands, and then at the tail end of the handshake, we snap the fingers. And his protocol team, his security team, the bodyguards, nearly lifted and just they thought I was harming him because he was surprised by the snap and got startled. And because he did that, they were on high alert and were ready to pounce on me as if I was trying to harm their head of state. I was so embarrassed. I didn't realize that, what we practice in Ghana, right, as a form of endearment has no international relevance. And that was one of the main turning points for me. I said, you know what? For me, I'm going to keep being in these type of environments. I'm a trusted leader, a trusted advisor to many senior leaders. I'm a trusted coach to many people in leadership, in corporate. And I can't be just getting away with doing what anyone gets away with in Ghana. And the more you practice the wrong thing, the more it just becomes the way you operate. And so I share that funny story to illustrate the point that, look, you might be okay in the environment you currently operate in. But I believe that some of us are being prepared for prominence. And if we're being prepared for prominence, it means that we really do need to change the way we behave. It really means that we need to elevate the way that we're able to interact. And especially when we come into this place of having lots of international exposure, it means that we have to be way more deliberate about ensuring that the way that we interact with people is reflective of international best practice, right? So I want to get into today's presentation. Session one, we're going to really focus on how to outclass the competition through what we call business etiquette. And one of the things that I really, really love about this course, it frames what we're going to be doing over the next 2 weeks. So this is kind of the foundational part of our learning, and it's going to set you up for what we're going to do in the coming weeks. So please hold all your questions towards the end. If you got burning questions, put them in the chat box so that as soon as I'm done with the formal presentation, we can get to those right away. And then I will send you via email the participant workbook for this particular course so that you'll have a resource that you can go back to be able to remind yourself of all of the things that we learned here today, because honestly, you will forget. So this is what we're going to be covering today. This is a snapshot of our learning journey together. I'm going to introduce you to the benefits of etiquette and protocol knowledge. I'm going to introduce you to some of the strategies you can use to distinguish yourself from your competition. I will talk about an entrance and exit. The way you enter and exit a room says so much about you. The science says that it takes 5 seconds for people to make a first impression about you. So for example, if you've never trained with me before, never met me before, never interacted with me as a business coach or any of the hats that I wear as a consultant, type in the chat box, what's your first impression of me? Because everyone makes impressions, whether you like it or not. It's not good nor bad. It simply is. So I just really want you to understand that people are making impressions of you. Your choice of what to wear, the way you enter and exit a room, the way you mingle. So we're going to talk a little bit about that, the networking piece, and then the proper ways and the international standards for greetings, including handshakes, including verbal greetings and interactions. And then we're going to look at introductions and strategies to elevate your networking game. All right. Does it sound okay? You can chat with me and let me know if we're on track. All right. So my objectives for today are to enable you to be able to apply etiquette and protocol intelligence in the business setting. I want you to be able to, leave this strengthening your ability to project professionalism through your body language. I want you to learn from today's session as well, how to make a powerful entrance and an exit and interact with people with confidence. And I want you to be able to introduce yourself and others and exchange proper greetings and make proper introductions. All right. So that's my goal. If at the end of today, you know how to do that, then I would have done my job. So we're going to start with some definitions. I'm going to be using these words, the word protocol and the word etiquette. And I just really want you to know the difference and the nuances between the two before we get into the deep end of today's presentation. So when I talk about protocol, We're really talking about the codes of conduct and the rules, the set styles of behavior that are official, especially if it concerns ceremony or very formal occasions. So most countries have a department. Well, in Ghana, for example, we have a Department of State Protocol. So they handle when, our president is receiving other heads of state, there's an official ceremony, there's a official procedure for how that gets done. So protocols are kind of procedural and they're unchanging and they're set in stone. And etiquette are kind of the rules and norms that govern behavior from place to place. And so protocols are the rigid and etiquette are the flexible. So for example, you might be able to tell from the sound of my voice that I am a multicultural African. Formative years of my life were spent in the US, and I came back to our motherland, Ghana, as a young adult. And so I am multicultural in that sense, and I've seen different cultures at play. So, for example, in Ghana, people take greetings very seriously. Good afternoon, good evening, whatever the case may be, good morning. Whereas when we lived in the US, I realized people weren't so big on greetings, especially if you lived on the East Coast or the West Coast, those busy business centers, people don't really care. And if you greet them, they actually are annoyed or suspicious. Like, why are you greeting me? So if you're on the streets of New York and you were greeting people, people would think that that was very odd. Whereas in Ghana, people would think it was odd if you didn't greet because people have it as an etiquette. So etiquette can vary from place to place, from culture to culture, and from geography to geography. But protocols are set in stone, and usually these protocols govern elevated ceremonies and state or ceremonial functions, right? So that's the difference between etiquette and protocol. So when I use the word protocol, it means we're really talking about something that's set in stone. So I'll introduce you to some of the protocols that govern business, and I'll talk about some of the etiquettes as well. All right. So as I am framing this presentation a little more, I want you to understand that when I talk about business protocol and etiquette intelligence, it's really your ability to apply the proper frame. Do I need to implement a protocol here or an etiquette here? Especially when you highly develop this, that's when we say that you've got really good protocol and business etiquette intelligence. And that's my goal for you, right? And so you might have seen this at play in the business world already, and you might have observed for those of you who have jobs that take you to different places. I've been working internationally for years, and I've traveled a lot across Africa. I've traveled a lot across Europe and the US, and I realize that every place that I'm in, there are different etiquettes, right? And so, for example, in a previous job role, I was in a management position, and we had clients coming in from China. And I didn't realize that Chinese have very strong gift-giving cultures. And at the end of our service to this Chinese business delegation that we were hosting, I was invited to a dinner. And I was, and I didn't go because I was tired and I didn't think to alert them that I wasn't coming. And my boss called me the following day and scolded me because she said that this delegation felt personally offended, the head of the delegation, that by Asian culture, to have received an invitation and not have formally declined it and not come was seen as an affront. But I was a 28-year-old young management, person, a young manager in this company, and I didn't realize the protocols that govern behavior in different places. So every invitation that you received needs to be formally replied to. I didn't realize that that was a protocol. And Asian cultures take that especially seriously. And apparently, other colleagues that went to that dinner, there was a very formal gift exchange. There was a very formal interaction that I had no clue about because I didn't know that there were protocols and etiquettes. So knowing this stuff can differentiate you. So when I went to protocol school, every job that I've had since, I've been the one that gets promoted above the colleagues. People accuse me of doing juju or being, someone who is sleeping with a boss or something because they can't understand why I am elevated quickly. And the truth is, it's because of these business protocols and etiquettes that I've understood and the intelligence that I applied to my work, in addition to my technical abilities, have made a world of difference. So I hope that this excites you about the possibilities with this knowledge. So why is it important? It's because it helps you distinguish yourself. For a lot of people who do this well, and I'm sure you can think about someone in your network who, they just have a distinguished way about them. Even if you've not worked with them before, you think very positively towards them simply because they're probably doing some of the things that I'll be teaching you today. It helps you also to develop and maintain business because the rules of etiquette and business protocol are really the kinds of rules that enable you to foster good relationships. It's like what the Bible says, against such things there's no law. There's no law against politeness and courtesy. There's no law against that. And so all of these rules for business etiquette and protocol really hinge on this idea of deference to others, of courtesy, politeness, and kindness. It also helps you to project a positive image. And I've seen this in my own business that, the more I work with companies and organizations, I ask them sometimes, why is it they chose to, me to be the one to do this work? And they would say things like, your presentation, excellent. The way you present yourself was excellent, or you got back to us first, or, your follow-up was, phenomenal. Those are the things that have set many people who are winning in the world of work apart from those who are not. And then lastly, it helps you to build teamwork because oftentimes we have tensions in teams and in organizations simply because we've forgotten to show deference and to show politeness and kindness. And that's really what a lot of the etiquette behaviors are about. So I hope I'm continuing to whet your appetite. So ordinarily we would do this exercise, but I wonder if someone wants to volunteer to raise their hand and do this exercise for us all to see. Imagine that you're at a social function right now and you're introducing yourself to a group of us. And we all on the audience today, or as participants of this call, will be who you're introducing yourself to. Is there anyone feeling bold enough to introduce themselves so that we understand and dissect some of the behaviors that we should be aware of when it comes to business etiquette knowledge? Does anybody want to unmute and raise their hand? Do I have any volunteers? You can use the raise hand function. I've stopped the presentation so that I can look into the chat box real quick. All right. Yes, I have a volunteer. Great. So Akria Ofori Krunting, please go ahead and unmute yourself. So your job is you are at an event, and all of us in the audience, this virtual audience here tonight, are in a group. How would you introduce yourself to us? And if you're able to get on video, it would be wonderful to see you while you do this as well, so that we can have a good example to work with. So imagine that we're all at a cocktail. Imagine that you are who you are. So whatever your current job role is, whatever it is you're doing, just tell us, how would you introduce yourself to a group of people that you did not know that you're meeting for the first time? And go.
All right. Good evening, everyone. My name is Etiquette Ofori Granting. I work with Stanbic Bank. I am the cash supply chain manager. It's a pleasure to meet you all and hoping to get to know you better. Thank you very much. Did I meet the criteria or I left something
All
out?
right. I want your audience to tell me how you did. Can you show
Oh,
me by
okay.
emoji? Dear audience, can you show me by emoji? If anybody wants to give verbal feedback, you can use the raise hand function as well, and I'd be happy to call on you. But the goal of this is to make it real and practical. When you meet someone for the first time, when you're in an audience that you don't quite know, there is an actual way to go about it. Cynthia, I see your hand is up. Can you please unmute and share your feedback to that introduction? If you didn't know her, what would your impression of her be and why?
Well, I think she did well because she was smiling. She mentioned her name. And straight away for me, the way she came up, smiled and greeted me, I liked it. Thank you.
All right. So you talked about a smile. You talked about
Yeah.
warmth. All right. I see Ella in the chat box has also said it was a warm introduction. Let's debrief it. What made it feel like a warm introduction as opposed to someone else's intro? You can use the chat box or you can use the raise hand function and I can call on you real quick. All right, Ansela, can you unmute and share your debrief?
Yes. I think the smile, well, apart from the smile, is that this aura of I'm happy to be in this space and I'm happy to meet you.
You used the word
Um,
aura. This was a virtual introduction. What's the aura? What did you see? Dissect that for us.
I think it was positivity in the smile, positivity, um, yeah, friendliness, openness. Yeah.
Great. Yeah, these are really good debriefs, and thank you so much for the two of you, well, the three of you who've spoken so far, and congrats, Ikria. I think you generally did a very good job on giving us a really good sense of yourself. You had a really good smile that was very positive. You really looked at and communicated. You looked at the screen, so we felt like you were talking directly to us. So it's eye contact, it's verbal cues. It's also intonation. I felt you did a really good job with your verbal tone. So I hope that that gives you a taste or a feeler of what you should be trying to do when you're giving a first impression. Behavioral psychologists say that it does take about 5 seconds for people to make a first impression about you. When I asked you first impressions about me, I was just reading in the chat box a few seconds ago. You said confident, you said composed, you said, very positive things about me, which tells me that I'm doing these things right. Because again, if you want to distinguish yourself from the competition, there are a couple of principles that enable you to do that. And I think Ikuya did many of them in general, which is why we're giving her such great feedback. So Ikuya, thank you and congrats once again. But eye contact is important. I think many of us, especially, because we come from a cultural context that makes us think different things about looking people in the eye. Many of us are sometimes unsure whether we should look people in the eyes. And I just want to encourage you because I grew up in America, but when we came back to Ghana, we had aunties and uncles and saying, "Hey, why are you looking me in the eye?" Whereas a different context was saying you got to look people in the eye because that is how you show confidence. That is how you build trust. So I want you to understand that in the world of business, there's an expectation that you would share eye contact. And I'm going to show you what professional eye contact looks like in a minute, because there's a difference between good eye contact and just being creepy. Because I don't know about you, but I've been stared at before, and being stared at just never feels comfortable. So eye contact is a big piece of that. Smile and facial expressions is another piece of that. One of the big pieces of feedback that I received from mentors is Yawa, fix your face. I generally am a very cerebral person. I love books. I love learning. So sometimes I just live in my head, right? But I had to learn how to not, live in my head and let people see positivity show up by smiling more and by using my facial expressions more than I used to. And I realized that that served me very well, especially, when COVID hit and I couldn't be in person and I would do Zooms over and over, and people just felt so connected because I've mastered the use of smiling and facial expressions to keep people with me as I present. And so I hope you agree with me as I'm facilitating these seminars for you over the next three weeks. Making an entrance, how you make an entrance into a building or into a room also is a big piece of that. I don't know about you, but I've been to events when someone enters the room, there's something about them. And I think that's what Ansela was referring to, the aura around them that makes you feel like they must be important or they must be worth knowing. And many times they may not have said a word. So I want to talk to you about some of the elements that you can use to have powerful entrances, because especially when you're in an environment where people do not know you, you want to make sure that every signal you're sending out is positive. The way you greet people and your posture, the way you introduce yourself and the way you introduce others, as well as your people skill, all of these work together to give you a professional image. So let's dig in. Let's start with eye contact. For a lot of people, that's why I want you to disabuse your mind of what you've learned culturally, because, don't look your elders in the face was something that we heard. Don't look away. It's a sign of deference. That goes against what the international rules of business protocol say. Eye contact is important because it shows people that you're listening. It also gives the impression of you as a great listener, and it helps boost the attention that people give you. And so there's 3 types of eye contact, and I want to show it to you real quickly because some of us might be making mistakes inadvertently. Some of us have the tendency to stare. So eye contact isn't about staring people down. It's about giving liberal amounts of attention, breaking it by looking away and returning that attention. So it's not a consistent glare. So let's look at what eye contact looks like in the business setting. Now, this blows a lot of people away because in Ghana, for example, I realized that in a lot of business settings, you meet someone for the first time and they're immediately making comments about what you're wearing. But that's not professional. If you don't know someone, if you've never seen them before, don't comment on their tie. Don't comment on their brooch. Don't comment on anything that is outside of this blue triangle. Do you see the blue triangle? That's where you keep your eye contact. This is considered professional eye contact. This is the realm of, nothing will be misconstrued when you're looking people in the eye in this way. Okay. So on the business level, this is what good eye contact should look like. It's that triangle between the forehead and the nose, the eyes, right? That small place is you looking people in their eyes. All right. This is considered social eye contact. So nothing below the lips. So those of us who our go-to intro is, I like your tie, I like your brooch, I like your whatever, you're actually giving more social than professional eye contact. And anything beyond the chin is considered intimate or sexual. And this goes against what a lot of us have practiced. I realize that. And if you're being delivered right in the chat box, then let me know that you're being delivered from poor choices, because I want us to elevate now our perceptions of professionalism and professional behavior. And oftentimes in the workplace, it's very easy to misconstrue people's senses and sensibilities. And this often happens when men and women are interacting in a work situation, because you're looking below my nose or below my chin. I'm wondering, are you, coming on to me, or are you actually about the business? And so for those of you who especially are interacting at an international level, I really want to invite you to obey the rules of what professional eye contact looks like. And it's very constricted, especially if you've yet to form a deep bond of friendship with whoever you're interacting with. You keep your eye contact in this general range. If you're at a social event, this is acceptable, but anything in this region is unacceptable. I hope that makes sense. All right. Now we're going to talk about our entrances. The way you enter and exit a room says a lot about you. It conveys a sense of confidence or lack of confidence. It also conveys this sense of a willingness to engage. And it also gives you the opportunity to really give a positive, good impression, especially if nobody knows you in that environment, right? So entrances are an art and a science. And I'm going to show you some videos, and I'm going to show you ways to really elevate the way you enter and exit a room. Because like we've established, it takes people 5 seconds to make an impression about you. And you look and you think, who's that person? And people are making judgment calls, not just by what you're wearing or how you look. People are making judgment calls by how confidently you walk. So a big piece of your entrances really need to focus on what kind of impression are you trying to give in this space. And I've been coaching women for many years now. And I am one woman who I've been coaching works at a very senior level in a very important public institution here in Ghana. And she realized that, she was promoted into this role. The previous person who was in the role was a man. And she said, I'm struggling with people taking me seriously. And when we did an in-person session and I was even, meeting her for the first time, I saw that she had a very weak entrance and a very weak handshake. And I said, before we move further, let's fix these two things, because it's hard to be perceived as a person of confidence and authority if you are not demonstrating these principles of power presence when it comes to the way you enter and exit a room. And so one of the things we'd like people to keep in mind is you want to be strategic. When you are entering, what do you want people to think of you? That should inform your choice. I, was thinking, like many of you on this call are interacting with me for the first time as a trainer. So I was thinking, what should I wear? I want to wear something that, makes you think that I'm serious, but at the same time, it's a late evening, it's after business hours, so not overly dressed, but I want to portray, this sense of positivity, but also professionalism. And I hope I've been successful. So although this is a virtual course, I'm still thinking about how I'm entering the space. And I encourage you to do so, because now, post-COVID, a lot of the meetings that you will have will be not just in person. You've got to think about what kind of virtual entrance you're making as well. When you get on video, how are people perceiving me? Is my lighting okay? Is my backdrop okay? I tilt my table to make sure that the backdrop, looks appropriate. I've got my bookshelf behind me. I've looked at the lighting in the room to make sure that you can see me. I've tested my sound so that you can hear me. So whether physical or virtual, you want to care about the presence and the entrance you make. So here are some of the PowerPoints for making a positive entrance. You want to look at your posture. I know a lot of people, and I see this a lot when I'm at events in Ghana. When you're late to an event, it doesn't mean you need to squat. It doesn't mean you need to tilt your posture and tiptoe. Still keep erect. Erect posture is one of your power signals for confidence. So keep your posture erect. And if you're late and you need to just pick up the pace and walk quickly, but never bow your posture, especially if you're in an environment where not everyone knows you, right? So posture is a big thing. The way you enter and the way you exit, the way you open the door, the way you close it. And I'm going to show you a video in a moment that demonstrates this. Your greetings. How do you greet people? And one of the main forms of greeting in a business environment is your handshake. So today I'm going to teach you what a professional handshake should look like. And again, much of my coaching has been with women more than it's been with men. My male clients, I haven't met a male client who gave me a poor handshake, but I've met many women clients who have weak handshakes. And so I really want to make sure that we understand what a good handshake looks like, right? When you're mingling, there are ways that you should interact with a buffet and a bar. And I want to talk a little bit about that. If you're the host or the guest, there are some protocols that you need to observe and, your social interaction. So let's start. This is Pamela Eyring. Pamela is the president of the Protocol School of Washington. And this is a quick video I'm going to show you of how to enter a room as she demonstrates. So hopefully this video will play without issue.
When making an entrance, walk confidently, head up, right hand free. When I enter a room, I always move to the right or left and pause. Pausing gives me a chance to find key people in the crowd. It also gives key people a chance to see me. Hello, may I join you?
Absolutely.
Thank you. I'm Pamela Eyring.
Hi, Pamela. Mario Melendez.
Nice to meet you, Mario. Hello, I'm Pamela Eyring.
Hi, Michelle Nolan. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too, Michelle. Hello, I'm Pamela Eyring.
Hi, Pamela. Fred Townsend.
Nice to meet you, Fred.
All right. So again, very simple, very elegant. You get out of the doorway. I'm going to play it again just so you get a second feel of it. But look at the elements. You enter into the doorway. You step away from the doorway. You survey the room. You keep a pleasant demeanor. Notice she wasn't over smiling, but she had a pleasant enough smile and she identified where she wanted to start in the room. She did not lower her posture. She kept erect and she extended a handshake and introduced herself. Notice in a first time encounter, you want to introduce your full name to each person. All right. So I'm going to play it again. Please take note.
When making an entrance, walk confidently, head up, right hand free. When I enter a room, I always move to the right or left and pause. Pausing gives me a chance to find key people in the crowd. It also gives key people a chance to see me. Hello, may I join you?
Absolutely.
Thank you. I'm Pamela Eyring.
Hi, Pamela. Mario Melendez.
Nice to meet you, Mario. Hello, I'm Pamela Eyring.
Hi, Michelle Nolan. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too, Michelle. Hello, I'm Pamela Eyring.
Hi, Pamela. Fred Townsend.
Nice to meet you, Fred.
Great. So I hope you get it, and I hope that that's helpful to you. So that's a key for power presence when you're entering a space for the first time. Now we want to look at your mingling. A lot of us struggle. So take a look at this and prepare yourself, because oftentimes many of us struggle with small talk. What do you talk about when you meet someone for the first time?
When making an entrance, walk confidently, head up, right hand free. When I enter a room, I always move to the right or left and pause. Pausing gives me a chance to find key people in the crowd.
Oh, apologies. I think that's the exact same video I've played. Okay, we're going to mingling now. All right. So a lot of us struggle with mingling. Like, what do I talk to a person about? But, we've now made a good entrance. Now there are people. Some of us are extroverted, so we're fine. But some of us are introverted. So it takes a lot of energy and preparation. Sometimes we get in our heads. We think, oh, what will I ever say? How am I being perceived? Sometimes you wonder, is my haircut okay? Is my hairstyle okay? Is my makeup okay? So I can understand that all of us are dealing with a lot of internal questions that sometimes affect our ability to mingle. But the truth is, when it comes to professionalism, small talk needs to be perfected, and it's expected because it puts people at ease. It helps you establish a connection. It doesn't necessarily require profound or original conversation, and it's the polite thing to do, right? So oftentimes, I like to tell people, that, small talk leads to big talk. So being comfortable enough to talk about sweet nothings with someone is a way to build rapport, build cordiality and trust so that you can lead to more substantial talk in the future. If you're married, think about your partner when you first started getting to know each other. I remember, those phone calls where you're not talking about anything in particular, but you're just enjoying each other's presence. Think about that as you think about how to approach small talk. Now, in the professional setting, small talk does have some boundaries, right? So, it's important to do, but there are some guardrails. When it comes to small talk, we want you to be well informed so that you know enough about what's going on in the world that you can be a meaningful participant in conversation. So, for example, what's the topical sporting event that's happening right now in Paris? Everyone, must know if you're watching or listening to the news that the Olympics are happening. So I'm not big on many of the topics, or sorry, many of the sports. But I followed the news so that if someone's talking about it, I know that St. Lucia, one of the island countries, won their first gold medal in the Olympics this year. I know, that Simone Biles, the American gymnast, was doing her thing again. I know enough to have meaningful small talk with anybody, right? Although I'm not necessarily engrossed in the Olympics, I know enough to participate in conversations about headlines. So think about your industry. Are you on top of what's happening in your industry so that if you went to an industry event, you would know enough to participate and make small talk? Do you know enough about what's happening in your geography, your country, your city, your town? Do you know enough that you would be able to be well informed to participate in small talk? Do you know enough? If not, work on that. Because small talk isn't necessarily profound or consequential, but it does need to portray you as a person of confidence. And it's hard to be confident when you don't know what's being talked about, right? So, one of my mentors said it to me this way: everyone should aspire to be a T personality. So, like the letter T has a stalk and a broad top. So the stock is be grounded in one body of knowledge, but then have broad knowledge about many things. So be a T personality. That helps you have great small talk. Don't interrupt. Please listen more than you speak. Think before you speak, because although small talk isn't about any, life transforming big stuff, usually, we want you to not come across like an idiot, right? So, for example, you're not going to meet someone for the first time and be talking about, simultaneous quadratic equations or Pythagoras theorem. But that's why a lot of times, the biggest and hottest topic for small talk is the weather. It's nice weather today, isn't it? Um, because you don't control the weather, I don't control the weather, NPP doesn't control the weather, NDC, whatever your political party is. So it's non-political, it's non-religious, it's non-confrontational. So within the guardrails for small talk, always avoid religion, always avoid politics, always avoid hot button issues. You don't meet someone for the first time and make broad statements about, anything that can be offensive, because the goal of small talk is to build trust and rapport, not to repel. So I hope that that makes sense. And the last thing is, every conversation that gets opened needs to be closed. And this is an error that I used to make a lot before I got this training, and I hope that you will stop making if you also fall into that category. Maybe you're in a conversation with someone and then someone interrupts you. It's poor manners to stop a conversation abruptly and not close it. So maybe you were interrupted by someone. When you're done with that person, you go back to the person you were interrupted while you were speaking to them, and you tell them, it was really good talking to you. I'm so sorry that we couldn't finish our conversation. I'd love to continue this conversation another time. Could we exchange business cards? Or apologize for being abruptly taken away and continue the conversation if they're amenable. So again, every conversation that gets open needs to be closed. I hope this is making sense and it's interesting and you're learning a lot. So a thing about small talk, I've talked about some of the suitable topics and things to avoid. And I just want to give it to you here as well. Avoid off-color jokes. And I've been in environments where I felt very uncomfortable because someone's met me for the first time, but they're telling very sexual jokes or saying things that, feel very offensive to my personal sensitivities. And so you want to be very, very sensitive. Sometimes men can come across as very misogynistic to women. Maybe you're in a cultural context where men get away with saying things like calling women girls or this small girl, where are you going? Things like that can be offensive when you're in international environments. And so just being able to elevate your conversations from henceforth, no matter whether you're local or international, would be greatly helpful, so that no matter where you're in, your speech is seasoned with salt, just like the Bible says, right? So I hope that this is helpful. Suitable topics involve things like weather, sports, like the Olympics example that I just gave you, travel. What's your favorite country to go to? Oh, you're a consultant. Oh, wow. What countries do you work in? And so travel is a go-to topic for me. Like if you could live anywhere else but your home country, where would you live? It's a good small talk question because it helps you know more about the person, what they hold valuable, what they like, and it builds trust and it builds rapport. Hobbies. Do you have any hobbies? What do you do when you're not working? And then that opens up another thing. I love to sing. Oh, wow. What type of music are you into? And then you've got meaningful conversation that really isn't anchored on anything that is controversial or offensive to anyone. So I hope this makes sense, and it gives you the more confidence to mingle with people with ease and with, professionalism. All right. So we're not going to do this exercise because it works better when we're in a group environment. So I'm going to skip this one. But when you're in an event, so some of you may be going to conferences where there are thousands of people in the room, or small, intimate events where there's maybe 50 people, 30 people, whatever the case, there are some ways that you enter and exit groups. And, one of the things that we were taught at Protocol School of Washington is eat before the events you go to. It is hard to come across as professional and collected and confident when you are starving. Do you notice what happens to your posture when you're starving? You put your head down to the plate. This happens at home. I notice, like, when I'm really hungry, I don't wait for the food to come up. I put my head down because I'm starving. And that happens in public as well. When you're hungry, when you're starving, you get to that buffet line, you're more likely to overload your plate, more likely to come across as all about the food instead of all about the environment. And it will it will hinder your ability to connect when you're starving, because you will take your attention away from the conversations and put your attention on the plate of food. So the secret to mingling like a pro is understanding that every environment you're in, it really isn't about the food. It's about the people. If you want to be a polished a polished professional, you've got to shift the attention away from food. That's the tool and the gateway that fosters the connection, but it isn't the main event. The main event is interaction. And so at small gatherings or huge gatherings, circulate, meet as many people as you can. That is part of how you grow, because the more you practice it, the easier it gets. The more you try and error different ways of introducing yourself, the more confident that you get. I used to go to events and find the one person I know and stay with that person throughout the entire event. And I realized when I went to Protocol School of Washington, I was actually, limiting my world because I wasn't actually mingling like a pro. The more you confidently mingle, the more people you get to know, the more people you know, the more potential for growth, especially if you're in business or if you want to position yourself as a person of great professionalism, because now I know people from several industries, several parts of the world. Every country I go to, I have a Rolodex of people that I can call. And it's because that I've learned how to bolster my mingling ability. And when I go to events, I see these events now as an opportunity, not to fill my belly, but to meet new people and to have conversations that could matter. Because like I said, small talk leads to big talk. One of the biggest training contracts I had came from a soiree, like a shindig, as they say. I went to this cocktail event, met a senior leader in the United Nations system, and I was telling her about what I do and all of that. And that turned into thousands of dollars worth of trainings for senior leaders in the UN system in East and Southern Africa. That was one of the most lucrative contracts I've ever done. And all of it started with some small talk. What do you do? Oh, really? Oh, you're posted in this country. How do you find the country? If you weren't in this country, where would you want to be? She just enjoyed our conversation and she wanted to know more about who I am and what I do. And I said, well, actually, I train, I'm a leader developer, and I'm someone who works with companies and individuals to really elevate their ability to bolster their professionalism, their public speaking. And she said, come and do everything for us, right? But that small talk led to big talk. So I want to encourage you, if you can hone your professionalism through how you mingle, it might be very lucrative and very profitable. Posture is a big thing, like I said, in how you enter and exit a room, but also in how you interact and mingle. You know, some of us feel really uncomfortable. You know, people with good posture appear confident, they appear healthy, happy, and approachable. And those with poor confidence, those who are looking away, putting their head down, poor eye contact, you come across as, you know, sometimes suspicious, or sometimes you come across as someone that, you know, just doesn't have the confidence. And, you know, instead of drawing people to you in a magnetic way, you repel them. So another reason why posture is critical. All right. So we're going to go to greetings, forms of greetings, etc., because this is a big piece of how people who don't know you get to interpret who you are, right? And under greetings, I'm going to introduce you to how you give a proper handshake, and I'm going to show you more videos to illustrate that as well. So in the business world, handshaking remains one of the key ways that you interact with people in forms of greeting. In addition to a verbal greeting, like a good afternoon or good evening or a hello, you want to make sure that your greetings convey power, professionalism, confidence, and composure. And so you want to make sure that you, as you grab a person's hand, whether it's in your locality or internationally, that you adhere to these international rules for what a good handshake looks like. I know that during COVID, people weren't shaking hands. And so we adopted different things like the elbow bump. But Protocol School of Washington sent us an updated guidance during COVID to say the better way to greet if you're unable to shake hands is to put your right hand over your chest and head nod. Okay, so practice that where you are right now. Put your hand over your head and give a head nod, or with a verbal greeting if necessary. So put your hand over your shoulders as if you're pledging to your flag, pledging allegiance to your flag, and then you head nod. So fist bump is not an international form of greeting. This is, right? So if you're unable to shake hands for any reason, sometimes if you have a cold or your hands may not be sanitary, you might just stand there and do this and say good afternoon, or put your hands, sometimes I do this, I do the steeple and say good afternoon, and smile, give a very nice smile and show pleasantness while you greet, okay? So the handshake greeting is, as the name suggests, the use of your hand and in a shaking manner, right? Now, handshakes, a couple of PowerPoints. Handshakes need to be done standing up. So when you have the opportunity to greet someone, you stand up and shake their hand. You stand shoulder to shoulder to shake their hands. You put your web, this is what we call the web of your hand, into the web of the other person's hand. So this area of between your thumb and your index finger is the web. The web of your hand needs to fit neatly into the web of the other person's hand. Now, you want to make sure that you shake from the elbow, not from the shoulder. All right. So it's a shake, not a pump, like you're pumping water. Okay. Now, I think in Ghana, we err on the side of having really long, awkward handshakes. We hold hands and we don't let go. That's not internationally relevant. I've made the mistake of doing that internationally as well. And people are like, what's wrong with you? Like, let my hand go. And again, in addition to snapping someone's hand, that's another mistake I've made with handshake that I want to encourage you to just do the international standard way of shaking hands so that when it matters, you already just do the right thing. Okay. So 2, maximum 3 pumps and a release. Okay. And so I want to give you some visuals. So this is how you convey your hand to connect for a handshake. Step 2, both hands, it's web to web. The web of your hand goes into the web of the other person's hand. And then the correct handshake, you will know it's correct because the tips of your 4 fingers will be seen on the back of the person's hand that you're shaking. Okay. If the tips of your finger can't be seen on the back of the hand that you're shaking, you're probably not doing web to web. If you do web to web, unless you're shaking hands with a child whose hands are significantly smaller than yours, the tips of your finger should be able to be seen on the tips of theirs, the back of their hand, right? Okay. If you're near somebody, you should probably practice this handshake right now and make sure that you've got it on lockdown. 2, maximum 3 pumps and release. Web to web. The handshake is done standing up, shoulder to shoulder, and you want to make sure that you don't linger. All right. This is what you want to avoid. You want to avoid the bone-crushing handshake. I've shook hands with people that felt like we were in a wrestling match that I didn't know about. So, if the person's hands are straight in your hands this way, it means you're squeezing too hard. Their hand should be able to gently rest on the back of your hand. If it's straight out like that, that means you're squeezing too hard. So don't do the bone crusher. Don't also do the glove handshake. And I see a lot of politicians do this handshake. And I know that, many people take cues from what their leaders do, but it's actually incorrect. Okay. So this type of handshake is also incorrect. It should be one hand, hand to hand. You don't have to glove the other person's hand with your other hand. It's a hand shake, not a hands shake. Okay. And then number 6 is what a lot of us women are guilty of, the fingertips. This is what we call the dead fish handshake. You just give them the tips of your finger, like you are not worthy to have all of my hand. And so this is one thing you want to avoid as well. So these are 3 incorrect handshakings. We want to do it right. This is the correct way. Show that you're ready for connection. Put both hands web to web, and then pump 2 times, maximum 3, and release. So while you're shaking hands, other things can and should occur. So if you're meeting someone for the first time, you introduce yourself, stating your full name. You also often shake hands when you're saying goodbye, and you could exchange pleasantries like, thank you, it was so good meeting with you today. I look forward to following up with you next week, or something of that nature. You also shake hands when you're congratulating someone or consoling someone, but again, you want to make sure that every time you shake hands, people see the difference. You've got good eye contact, you've got good charisma. If you're in a conference and the person is wearing a name tag, you shake hands and mention their name. Pleasure to meet you. And then you mention their name. It's another way to convey confidence and authority. All right. There are alternative forms of greetings, like the hand over the chest, as is demonstrated on the screen here, hand over heart, or the head nod, or the wave, or the elbow touch. And again, the elbow touch is the least professional of all of them. So, just take note, especially because of COVID, there's just a lot of, variety now in how people greet. Just a note about handshakes between men and women. If you're in a social environment, maybe you're at a party, you're at some sort of cocktail event, you're not in a formal business setting, handshake happens between men and women only when the woman extends her hand. I'm going to say that again. In a social context, men and women shake hands only when the woman extends her hand. So if you are a man and you're at a cocktail event or in some sort of, non-work formal event, you greet women by a head nod. Good afternoon, ma'am. It's good to see you again. How are you? Or good afternoon, or whatever the case may be, your choice from this list. But the handshakes in social settings only happen when the woman extends their hand. So please note that that's the caveat for gender. In a business environment, we're considered equals, but in a social environment, women are considered a little more superior to men, that only, they need to be treated deferentially. That's why it's often seen as good etiquette for men to pull out the chair to help a woman be seated. When a woman gets up from the table, all the men at the table stand up. And I've been in environments where that has happened, and I never knew that that was a thing, but it's a thing, right? So again, the more formal you go, if it's a social event, there are some caveats on how you greet and how you shake. But I'm teaching you the basics for the professional settings. And in the materials that I'll send you as part of your participant workbook, it expands on some of this. So don't worry at all. All right, so here's another video for you to watch to get some more guidance.
Shaking is the ultimate greeting. You simply extend your hand forward, making a web-to-web connection, shaking hands, maybe 2 to 3 pumps. Let me demonstrate. If you cannot shake hands, you have another option. You can put your hand over your heart and give a slight nod.
All right, that was simple, wasn't it? But now you know how to shake hands like a boss. So next time you have the opportunity to shake hands with someone, make sure that you use it well and you make me proud. So now let's go to introductions. We're nearing the end of the formal presentation, and I'm going to leave time at the end for questions and Q&A, and interactions and comments. So introductions is also a big piece of how you demonstrate professionalism in the world of work. And so, we're going to start with how you introduce yourself. You'll have opportunities to introduce yourself at different times, and you will have the opportunity to really, really, make a case for why people should trust you or why people should listen to you by the uniqueness in which you introduce yourself. So it is your duty to introduce. And so this is a part that I do encourage people to practice so that you don't sound so rehearsed, that you don't sound so scripted that people feel like when you're introducing yourself, you're actually rehearsing. But you do it enough so that you have different versions of your introduction based on what you're trying to convey in the environment you're in. Some of you may be in a sales role. Your job requires you to be selling, you're selling a service or selling a product, and the way you introduce yourself also endears you to your potential prospect. So introductions do matter, and it's part of how people size you up to determine whether or not, they want to do business with you, they want to interact with you more, they want to know you. All right. So again, practice is key to this. So let me show you a quick video on a really great, professional way to introduce yourself.
When introducing yourself, you want to say your first and last name as well as your organization. Let me demonstrate. Hello, I'm Pamela Eyring. I'm with the Protocol School of Washington.
Pamela, good to see you. I'm Tyler Ryan with the TR Syndicate.
Oh, yes, I've seen your company advertised.
Thank you. How are things at the school?
Simple, right? Before the small talk starts, you introduce yourself, full name, business association. It doesn't have to be laborious. It also doesn't have to be too theatrical, you know. When you're in a business environment and people don't quite know you yet, you want to err on the side of conservatism. So you might have seen that demonstrated there. Now, every industry is different. You know, maybe you're in the creative industry, or maybe you're a business owner with your own flair. I remember going to an event, for example, where someone met me for the first time and he said that I should autograph his sleeve. It was so theatrical, but I remembered him because I met so many people at that conference. But he said I was a speaker at that event, and he said he was so thankful for all the things that I shared. And he stood out because he was the person that said I should sign my autograph on his sleeve. And I thought that was really interesting, but in his introduction, it really stood out. So I say that to say, also make it your own. Don't feel, you have to be boxed in, especially if you're creative and you want to bring more personality into how you meet and greet people. Get creative to the extent that, you feel comfortable. Now, I've told you that there are different scenarios in which you introduce yourself. When you attend a business event, when you're sitting next to someone, it's considered very rude to be sat next to someone and not have introduced yourself. So, hi, my name is Yawa. What's your name? Introduce yourself to whoever's to the right or to the left of you. If you're at a table, maybe you've gone to a dinner event, before you sit down, go around and greet everyone individually at the table, introducing yourself, knowing who they are as well before you take your seat. Now, when you are in an environment where potentially you're meeting someone who might have met so many people, err on the side of assuming that you are not remembered. And I see this happen in Ghana a lot. Some people get quite offended when you don't remember them. I don't know, I just love assuming that people don't remember me. Hi, I'm Yawa. We met at so-and-so, so-and-so, and I try and help them remember where they met me because I've been on the receiving end of that and know that it can be so painful. In the next couple of weeks, I'm going to be doing events and speaking and training in Ghana, in Kenya, and in South Africa. And sometimes I see a person and I know that I've seen this face before, but I honestly can't place it. And so similarly, you might be, interacting with someone who might honestly just not remember you. So when you're introducing yourself, it's also a way of helping the person that you're meeting, especially if there's someone who's likely to not have remembered you, to remember you. I hope you remember me. I'm the guy whose shirt that you signed. So for example, the person in the example that I gave before, anytime I see him, and I've met him a few times now, so of course I remember who he is, but it was just a really unique way that this person who wanted my attention got it because he did something that nobody else did. And because he had me sign his shirt, anytime he would meet me at a different event or a different context, he had said, "Oh, you don't remember me? I'm the guy who asked you to sign the shirt." So again, you want to be remembered and you want people to remember you, and introductions of yourself and others is a key way to do that. The protocol for introductions is that you should never give yourself an honorific. An honorific is essentially a title. So I'm married, so I have the title of Mrs., but I should never introduce myself as Mrs. Yawa Hansen-Quao. And I see that that happens a lot in my cultural context in Ghana, and I don't know if that happens in yours, but people introduce themselves with an honorific. It's actually poor protocol. An honorific is assigned to you, not assumed by you. And the only exception to this is doctors that are medical doctors. And even that, it's, people might say, is there a doctor in the room? Or if there's an emergency, people should know that there's a medic. And that's the only reason why there's an exception for medical doctors. But otherwise, you don't introduce yourself as, Dr., Mrs., Prophet, Seer, Evangelist, Yawa Hansen-Quao. You just introduce yourself as Yawa Hansen-Quao. So good afternoon, my name is Yawa Hansen-Quao. right? So an honorific is assigned to you, not assumed by you. So the protocol here is that you must never give yourself an honorific. The only exception here is usually medical doctors. I'm Dr. Yawa Hansen-Quao. That's assuming I was a medic, right? All right, I hope this is good. I hope you're really, really picking up lots of new insights that'll help you elevate the way you present yourself, elevate the way you introduce yourself, elevate the way that you handshake, and elevate the way you give first impressions, that they move from good to great. So responding to introductions is also worth talking about. When someone introduces themselves to you in a business setting, hey and hi are considered way too casual, right? So hello is better than hi. Hello or good afternoon or good evening, hello, Pamela, it's nice to meet you. So the way you respond also says a lot about your level of professionalism. So hello is always better than a hi. And another thing I notice in my cultural context is that oftentimes people will meet you for the first time and give you an endearment or an honorific, which is inappropriate. So, meeting someone that you don't know and saying, yes, dear, is very, very it's a breach of protocol. Let me put it that way. So yes, dear, yes, sweetheart, yes, honey, those are words of endearment for people with whom you've built rapport and you have depth of relationship, not for a first time encounter. So sometimes people will say sweethearts, and that's actually wrong. It's rude. And for those who come from different cultural contexts, it can be seen as very offensive because in their social context, that's a way of, it's almost like a backhanded way of devaluing a person. Parts of my life were spent in the southern part of the US. And one of the backhanded ways that they would, talk to you when someone says, bless your heart, they're not really saying, bless your heart. There's like, oh, you poor thing, bless your heart. It's like, you don't know what you're talking about. So there are some backhanded connotations to words like dear and honey, if they're not actually used on someone with whom you have a depth of relationship, right? So please take note of that. Don't get too casual too quickly with people. Hello, sir. Hello, ma'am. Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am. Good afternoon, sir. Good afternoon, ma'am. As opposed to, adding anything else. Sweetheart, darling, sweethearts, I've gone to shops to buy something and all of a sudden the person is calling me dear or sweetheart. And because I, have a multicultural background, I get ticked off, to be honest, by that. So again, what may work in your locality may not be internationally relevant. So please take note. When you're introducing others, the protocol is you want to understand that the person of greater authority receives the person of lesser authority. And this is, one of the ways that we distinguish those who are truly distinguished from those who are not. So when you are meeting someone and introducing people to each other, you want the person of greatest rank to be the one to be introduced, the one of least rank to be introduced to the person of greatest rank. And so I'll give you a couple of examples, and then we'll look at some video as well. Now, this gives you an edge because it's like, oh, this person really understands that I am not being introduced to that person. They are being introduced to me. And especially if you're dealing with government, and government people are very sensitive to this thing. And I've been, in my previous role, I worked as a partner to the government of Ghana, government in Kenya, government in Liberia, these three countries. I was really working with very senior government officials. And this right here differentiated me in so many ways. I remember my first business trip to Kenya, with that organization. I left in 5 days with a signed letter of agreement because I understood by this time I had done protocol training, I had done all of this, and I knew how to deal with people at this level. So although I was dealing with people who were old enough to be my father, old enough to be an uncle, and by age, I'm not very old, But I realized that I put them at ease. I also demonstrated a professionalism that blew them away. So my board of directors was so shocked. Usually they said, wait, they signed a letter of intent already? I said, yes. I said, how did you do that? And the truth is, it's these rules. I understood that I was dealing with people of rank and authority. I knew how to make them feel appreciated. I knew how to be respectful and deferential, but at the same time professional. And all of this had them eating out of my hands. And that role, I, in 4 years, was able to launch 2 new countries because I understood how to deal with government leaders. And so this is an area I've been coaching a lot of the people, that work with me. And in fact, I'm working with a client now. Their company has promoted 5 directors into leadership roles, and many of them were going to be dealing with different countries. One is manning the China desk, one is handling the Americas, the other is handling Europe, and all of them are going to be interfacing with people from different countries. And so I'm teaching them some of these skills and strategies that I used in my previous job to really elevate and to do business well and quickly. So I tell you, this makes a world of difference if you know how to introduce well. So the protocol is that the person of greater authority receives the person of lesser authority. So let's say you're meeting a CEO or a client, and you want to make sure that you understand the precedents and the most important person in this room. There's also a protocol for where you seat them. The most important person in any business sitting needs to be sat to the right of the host. Now, a lot of people don't realize that. And so sometimes, people feel disrespected and don't say anything because of how you seated them. People who understand the protocols might feel disrespected and poorly treated just because of how you introduce them. And so that's why I want you to understand that these protocols are non-negotiables when it comes to introductions, right? So that whoever has least authority, their name is always spoken last. So you shouldn't reverse the order. Let's look at a specific example. So for example, if you're in an environment, a senior executive receives a junior executive. So if Mr. Jones, is the CEO, you would say, I would like to introduce to you Mr. Junior Executive, right? So maybe you're saying, Mr. CEO, I would like to introduce to you the newest member of our sales team. He just graduated from Ashesi University. His name is Kwabena Edu, and he's going to be working with my team from henceforth. Kwabena, this is our CEO. You're not introducing the CEO to Kwabena, you're introducing Kwabena to the CEO. You get the difference? So it's a small tweak that lets people know that you know what you're doing, that you understand rank and status. You understand that in every scenario, you understand who's more senior to the other so that you do the introductions properly, you do the seating properly, and you make sure that you facilitate conversation properly. All right. So tell me which one of these is correct. Mr. Jones, let's assume that Mr. Jones is the one of greater authority. Which one of these is correct? Is it number 1? Is it number 2? Or is it number 3? All right, I won't leave you hanging. It's number 3. So Mr. Jones, I would like to introduce to you Ms. Smith, right? So whoever's of greater authority, they are mentioned first, and they are the ones receiving the lesser authority, right? So Mr. Jones, I would like to introduce to you Ms. Smith. All right. All right. So make sure when you're doing your introductions, you don't make unnecessary gestures. Some people have nervous tics. When they're nervous, they wring their hands or they shift their weight from leg to leg. Some people, if they're a little nervous, they touch their face and they, rub their nose. Like, be calm. When your hands are not in use, the best place to put them is right beside you. And I know a lot of people feel so uncomfortable just standing erect with their hands by their side. So some people keep their hands mid-rift, that's fine as well. But you want to come across smooth, that every movement of your body is deliberate, especially your gestures. Look at people when you say their name. So when you are saying Mr. Smith, you turn and look at Mr. Smith. When you're saying Miss Jones, you turn around and look at Miss Jones, especially when you're fostering an interaction within a group. When someone makes an error and misintroduces you, please smile and correct the error as soon as you're able. So thank you for the kind introduction. I'm not Dr. Yawa Hansen-Quao. I'm actually not a doctor, but thank you for the elevation, and then move on. So correct it. So don't, allow a title to be put on you that you haven't earned or deserved. And then always stand when you meet someone. Like I said with the handshakes are done standing up because it's usually happening at the opening or the closing of a conversation, and you always want to stand for those. So always err on the side of formality and use honorifics when you're introducing people. So you want to say, Mr. Jones, please meet Miss Smith. You want to use the honorific as a way of deferring to people, okay? So I hope this makes sense, and I hope this has been delightful for you.
When you're making introductions of two persons, you want to keep your hand gestures low and not excessive, such as waving your hands back and forth or pushing two people together to meet. Watch how I demonstrate making an introduction. I'm using higher authority's name first, our mayor. Mayor Townsend, I would like to introduce to you our newest resident in our city. Please welcome Mr. Mario Melendez.
Mr. Melendez, thank you for bringing your company to our city. Oh, excited to be here. Got to have you.
See how simple, see how smooth that was? So again, those hand gestures, you want to minimize them, err on the side of conservatism, err on the side of formality. You use the honorifics when you're introducing people to each other, and you want to make sure that as you're doing these things, you're doing it with thoughtfulness. If we were together in a room, I'd ask each of you to introduce people, but for the sake of time, I'm going to power through this one as well. So in closing, we're going to do networking. Some of the protocols, you want to become a better networker, try to remember names. One of the key things is stop telling yourself you're bad at remembering people's names, and just write it down, listen carefully, try to associate the name with something that you've heard, look at people's faces when you speak to them, because oftentimes that helps you, deepen your memory. And then if in doubt, just ask. I know I've had a few conversations where I'm embarrassed to say, like, I had a full conversation with this person and just did not even know who I was talking to. Someone will ask, who was that? And I was like, I honestly don't know. So the more wise thing to do is ask. Just say, please remind me your name. I know I should know this by now, but could you please remind me what your name is? And if someone doesn't remember your name, don't catastrophize. Don't be so dramatic. Just tell them what your name is and move on, okay? Because oftentimes that's some of how, especially if you're not in a place where you're a celebrity, like if Oprah showed up, we would all know who that was. But maybe you're not Oprah yet. So stop hating on the fact that someone's forgotten your name, okay? Don't catastrophize over it. Just, move it along. And if you can't remember someone's name, extend your hand and smile and say your name, and hopefully they'll respond with theirs. And if not, it does help to just ask again. Apologies for not remembering, but could you remind me your name, please? All right, great. There is a business card protocol as well. There is a way to give and receive a business card. So these are the key elements of the protocol. A business card is given in the direction of the text. So if the text is horizontal, present the card horizontally. If the text is vertical, present the card vertically. Please carry a card holder or a case. There's nothing worse than getting a card with frayed edges or with stains on them, makeup stains or oil stains or writing on them. the business card is seen as a physical representation of you. And if someone's physically holding you, you want to look good, don't you? So keep your cards in a card holder so that the edges remain clear, and the quality of the print and the quality of the card itself, the integrity of it is intact. How many do you take? I mean, when you're going to events, make sure you have enough business cards. A lot of people are saving the trees and for environmental purposes aren't really printing business cards anymore. A lot of people are doing QR codes. My husband brought home this really interesting thing. You just put your phone to it and scan it, and then all of the person's details get in your phone. So this is becoming a lost art, I will admit, but in very high level places, they still use business cards. And so you must understand and oblige the business card protocol. In Asian cultures, it's considered respectful to do it with two hands, as you see in the picture. So again, always give the card in the direction of the text. Always make sure the card is clean and it's come from a card case. When you receive a business card, you want to put the card that you received in the same place that you keep your cards. It's shown as a type of respect. So don't put it in your breastplate pocket. Don't put it in your back pocket. Don't write on it in front of a person. Just receive the card. You look at it. You might want to confirm the information. Once you receive the card, it's like you've received the person. So you want to acknowledge it. You want to say thank you. You want to confirm what's the best way to reach you, and I've done that a few times. And someone says, oh, actually, let me write my cell phone number. They've got office lines or a line that goes to some general switchboard. But if they've enjoyed the conversation and really want you to follow up by asking that simple question, they might actually give you the exact way to reach them more directly. All right. So that's how you receive and you give a business card.
Your business card is part of your visual communication package. You want to be sure that when you present the card, that the receiver remembers you. Keeping your business card in a case or inside your jacket pocket works wonderfully. Let me demonstrate.
Simple and smooth. So I hope you're getting that. And, these visuals are so helpful. All right. I'm going to talk a little bit about telephone protocol because a lot of us do spend a lot of time on our phones, and a lot of us are doing much of our business on the phone now. WhatsApp has become pervasive, and so the way you interact with clients has changed considerably. Sometimes these days people are surprised when they get a phone call, just WhatsApp me. Why are you calling me? So, the way you respond as a polished professional to your phone calls matters. So answer in a very professional and pleasant manner. Make sure that you don't sound like you're in bed, or you don't sound like someone who is disappointed or disturbed or annoyed by the phone call. As long as you pick up the call, make the effort to be pleasant. All right. That's one of the general rules. Usually, it's good to announce yourself, like, good afternoon, this is Yawa. Who's speaking, please? Or good afternoon. If I don't know who the person is, may I know who's speaking, please, before, we get into the conversation. So pleasantness is really the key thing we want to reiterate here. Take and give clear information. I do a lot of my work over calls. A lot of my coaching clients live abroad. So I'm in Ghana, but they're speaking to me from abroad. And so, we go onto a Zoom and I have to be pleasant, be, really, really professional in how I engage them because they are my client. And in this situation, they are the person of greater authority. And so I am very deferential. Yes, ma'am. No, please, etc. Just because I understand the precedents and the protocols that are required because of the orders of precedence in that relationship. So, you really want to be aware that if you're going to record someone or put them on speaker, you need to ask them. I'm about to put you on speaker. I'm in the room with John and Jeremiah. They're going to be listening in. It's considered rude and a breach of protocol It's considered a breach of protocol to not offer people the courtesy of letting them know that they're being recorded. Even Zoom lets people know they're being recorded. You should too. So if you're on a phone call and you need to put someone on speaker, just let them know in advance so that they know that they have more of an audience than just you. That's the telephone protocol. And state it if there are other people listening in. It's considered good protocol. On a cell phone, please note that cell phones are considered personal electronic devices when it comes to meetings and formal environments. Don't even put them on a dining table. It's considered rude. I remember when I went to the White House, I had the opportunity to meet President Obama as part of a delegation, and everyone, before you enter the cabinet room, there's a cubby hole where you leave your phone. So the way we're attached to our phones in certain environments isn't considered appropriate in the more formal places. So you want to be able to make sure that we really understand that our cell phones are considered very personal electronic devices. Set them to vibrate, put the sound off. Make sure that you're in an environment where nobody will be disturbed by or interrupted by the sounds coming from your personal electronic devices. Voicemail, I know a lot of people don't really use voicemail, but I see on WhatsApp now, a lot of people are now doing voice notes. So please note, like if you're leaving a voice note, especially if it's to a client, announce yourself. Like, hello, this is Yawa Hansen-Quao from HQ Consulting. I was just wanting you to know that our Polished Professionalism course is starting tonight. We haven't received your payment yet. If you have any issues, please text my colleague Narki and she can assist you. So a quick note that announces who you are, identify yourself, the purpose of this note. So voicemail protocol is still relevant, even if you're not using voicemail in the traditional sense of the word. So please note that. When it comes to electronic communication, you want to be professional, you want to use appropriate language, you want to also try to be direct and to the point, but as well polite. I try to be pleasant in my emails because I realize that, look, if you have to read all these emails, at least, feel the love through the words that I use. So emails are really a formal communication in the business world. So use spell check, make sure that you've used proper grammar and pronunciation, make sure that you've looked at the documents. If you're sending attachments, that there are no errors in them, and that the body of the email says see attached, but there's no attachment. Just take the effort to make sure that everything is in order. And typically the protocol is that all emails should be responded to within a 48-hour period. And I know that I don't always meet that metric, but if I can't, I usually email ahead and say, look, I'm going to need more time to get a response to you. So these are generally the things that you want to be mindful of when it comes to email communication. When it comes to social media, if you are someone who has an email that is like sexytilapia22@gmail.com, you might want to consider changing it. Because if you're polishing your professionalism, you want all of your social handles, your email addresses, anything that's out there about you to portray the sense of seriousness, the sense of authority, of power, of executive presence. And it's hard to do that. I remember my first email address was a funny email address, and I had to let go of that. Like, I'm leveling up now. So I've got to let go of that and just use emails that have my name at my, business address, right? So again, you want to err on the side of professional than personal. A lot of employers now, before they hire, they do social media searches of their prospective candidates to see who is this person portraying themselves to the world. There are employees who've lost their jobs these days for things that they've posted online because it's giving the employer a bad light or a bad reputation. So social media now needs to be taken way more serious, and find your voice, find a way to really use your channels to really convey seriousness, positivity, and things that will enable you to feed into this polished professional demeanor and presence that you're trying to cultivate. when you're hosting a conference, you know, like this virtual Zoom, you know, turn off your cell phones, all the notifications, the call waiting. I realized that I forgot to put, you know, on silent all the notifications on my phone. So a few seconds ago, you might have noticed that there was, you know, a notice that somebody was trying to call me. But ideally, you want to, you know, be prompt. You want to make sure that you put in, you know, all the meeting details. You know, we try to make sure that you had the Zoom link like at least an hour before today's meeting so that you could know and be prompt so that we could start promptly as well. Pay attention to your video. Like you want to make sure the lighting isn't behind you, that you're lit up and you can be seen. You want to test your microphone, make sure that you can be heard, etc. So that's it for tonight. I hope you've enjoyed it. You know, like I said, I get really excited when I get to teach these topics because I see the world of difference that these topics have made in my own life. I hope that you've really picked up a thing or two that you didn't know before. I will be emailing you the participant workbooks so that you can, throughout this week, at least review it and review the notes and, you know, really deepen your understanding of these topics. I'm going to come to the chat box now and see how it's going here. If there are any questions, if you want to unmute and ask your questions, you can use the raise hand function as well. So let's see. All right. Thank you very much. I see lots of thank yous. Okay, Imelda, I see you. I see your hand up. So please unmute and ask your question or share your comment.
Yeah, so thank you so much, Yawa. I think the change of time, I missed the first two sessions. I just came in at around half past, but I'm sure I'll catch up with the recording. So my question is straight on the introductions, because I know sometimes you from what you've just presented is that the best thing to do is your first name, your surname, and you know, greet first name, second and surname. But I've been challenged in situations where you do not talk about, no, of course, with your company, but then I was challenged, what do you do? You know, should it just come naturally as a second question, or you think it's also quite right to kind of mention of what you do, how do you belong in that particular space? That's the question for now. But thank you, quite valuable tips.
Good, good. I'm glad this is valuable. I'm going to take other questions and then answer everything at once, noting that we're a little over time now. So Patience, I see your hand is up. Kindly unmute and ask.
Oh, hello. Hi. Hello, everybody.
Hi
Very,
there.
very insightful session. I've learned a lot. Thanks a
Good.
lot. I think it's just along the same lines as Imelda. And this actually happened to me was about 3 days ago. I was at an event and somebody approached me, you know, and I said, hello, my name is Patience. And she said, Miss or Mrs. And I said, my name is Patience, you know, and the person was pushing back. I maintained that boundaries that no, I mean, I don't have to tell you whether I'm Miss or Mrs. And I think the person didn't like it that much. So I'm so happy that I've learned about the honorifics, you know, that, yeah, I was right in doing that, you know, yeah. But I think culturally, it's not culturally relevant, but I don't know. Yeah, so yeah, I'm happy, you know, at least I know I
Yeah.
was doing yeah.
And you'll see in the material that I send you, the right honorific for a woman in business is Miss, MS. So even if you're married or not, you know, and again, the business world really is about equity, that Mr. is for all men, whether they're married or not, and Miss is for all women, whether they're married or not. And that's why I said, you know, it would be very valuable for us to really understand what's internationally accepted. And I do think there's something also about extending grace to people who may not have this knowledge. And so instead of, you know, maybe making them feel bad for asking, I say things like, hey, I'd rather not say if you don't mind, and then smile and move on to the conversation instead of like, why are you asking? So this information isn't for you to become a judge of other people. This information is for you to do what's right, you know, and do it wherever you show up. But this isn't for you to be pointing fingers and correcting people. So I'd really love to put that out there as well. But you are right. The right honorific for women, you know, when you're introducing yourself, you don't assign an honorific. And if someone were to assign an honorific to you, the correct one in a business setting should be Miss, not Mrs., because it doesn't matter whether you're married. It matters how you work. And that's why, you know, they have the equivalent of Mr., which is for all men, whether they're married or not, and then Miss, which is for all women, whether they're married or not. To your question, Imelda, about the introductions of yourself in different contexts, you know, when you're being introduced or when you are the one introducing, you know, the rule of thumb, as you saw from the video, is you want to introduce your first name and your last name. In a business setting, it's usually business association. But, you know, one of the slides that I showed you was asking the question, what's on the agenda? And part of it is thinking, what is really on your agenda? How do you want to be known in this space? You know, I note that when I left my job in 2022, I'd worked, you know, I got so used to introducing myself as executive director of that organization that the first couple of events that I went to, it was like, what was coming out of my mouth. I had to correct myself and catch myself. I was like, no, actually, I'm no longer that. So again, that's why I encourage you to practice different versions of introducing yourself. Sometimes I go to places and I say things like, my name is Yawa Hansen-Quao, and I'm a leader developer. I work with leaders at different levels to help them, you know, really hone their leadership skills. So I didn't say that I'm a managing director of HQ Consulting. I didn't say I'm a certified intercultural etiquette professional. I didn't say any of that. I just said I'm a leader developer. Sometimes I go to different contexts and I say, hi, you know, my name is Yawa, and I consult for governments and companies and help them to get strategic about some of their human resource and professional objectives for hiring and retaining talent. So there could be different renditions of your introduction based on who's in the room, based on what your agenda is. So when I get an invitation, I reach out to the organizer, who else is coming, because I want to be deliberate about who I look out for in the crowd. I heard this person was coming. Sometimes I'll ask questions like, can you make sure I sit at this person's table? You know, I was speaking at a virtual event this past week, and I asked the organizers to send me the invite list. And I saw a few people on the invite list that I had reached out to me on LinkedIn. And so I reached out to them and said, oh, I was excited to see that you signed up for this session. I look forward to seeing you, just to make sure that they would come, because they are people that have reached out to me for training and coaching. And I thought that it would be good for them to see me speak here, because it would give them a sense of how I am as a speaker, a trainer, a coach, a leader developer, right? So have an agenda and let your introduction be formed by that agenda, as opposed to having one size fits all for every situation and every event you go to. I hope that helps. All right, I see you've said in the chat box that that helps. Great. Dukes, responding in the business field, I'm very well by the grace of God. Okay, let's go there. You know, many of us on this call, I'm sure, might have a faith persuasion. You might be a person of faith, and you might have become very accustomed to introducing yourself or responding to greetings or introductions by adding things like, I am blessed and highly favored. How are you? I'm blessed and highly favored. Or I'm doing well by the grace of God. I realize that, you know, as much as that works when you're dealing with people who are of your same faith persuasion, when it comes to the professional world, it helps to just keep it a little more simple. People who may not believe what you may believe may be so put off by that. People who may not have the faith persuasion or have had a bad experience. And you just remember the slide that I showed you about small talk. There's a reason why we remove religion from small talk, because it stirs up passions, and sometimes it's not good passion. And so, you know, I'm a Christian, I'm a believer. I grew up in the church. My father was a Christian missionary. And I grew up in the church, and I know what it's like to have church talk that is acceptable and relevant in church circles. But when you start moving into other circles, it becomes less so. So I tell people that I coach, when it's a first time encounter, let's err on the side of deferential respect and just assume that people, are agnostic to what I believe, and I'm just not going to oppress people by being ultra religious in how I speak. Now, I'm a consultant, I'm a coach. I often weave Bible scriptures into my teachings, and I tell people that, I've drawn a lot of biblical professional skills and practical skills from scriptures. And so, in the context of this presentation, I invite you to consider it as just a reference book, not necessarily a book that is your truth. And I use that as kind of an opening statement to set the stage. If I'm going to use a biblical example, you might have heard the story of David and Goliath, and that illustrates this business principle that I want to talk about today. And so there's a way that you can learn to weave your faith into your small talk that prepares people that your faith is a very important thing to you. It shows your character, but I wouldn't do it in a first encounter with someone who you're trying to do business with. And I would encourage you to be as knowledgeable about who you're about to meet. That's why I really love to ask event organizers, send me the list. I want to know who's coming. If I'm going to be at a dinner, I want to know who's coming. I want to know, okay, well, I might Google a person. I might go to their LinkedIn. I want to get a feel for them. I want to get a sense of, so that I know that, oh, this person, they go to church. So that I might say blessed and highly favored very strategically to that person, because they know, I want them to know that I'm a Christian too, like two believers in the house, yo. So again, it feeds into what Imelda was asking. You want to have your agenda, have clarity about what you're trying to, how you're trying to portray yourself, and make sure that you don't alienate people by being too much, in terms of how you present yourself as a person of faith. I hope that's helpful. All right. I don't see any new questions in the chat box. Does anybody else have questions they want to unmute and ask? All right. I don't see any other ones. Oh, there is another one. Okay, great. What's the protocol to meeting your friend at an event? So when you have a friendship, these rules and protocols go out of the window. But I do note that friendships are best sustained when you still treat people with deferential respect. So there's no protocol to say you can't talk religion with a friend, or you can't talk, deep things. Hopefully your small talk has evolved into deep talk at this point of friendship. But I do notice that a lot of people get very mean to their friends in ways that sometimes destroys the relationship. I taught a class, well, I do these master classes. I volunteer these master classes to different communities that I'm a part of. And this week I taught a series, that I developed called Win at Work. And I talked about how to maintain relationships with colleagues, people that you work for or with. And I think sometimes we get too familiar too quickly. And so, I remember my husband said to me, for example, who are you talking to on the phone? And I said, oh, I said, wow, I wish you talked to me the way you were talking to them. And I felt so embarrassed because he's right. Like, I've been married to him this is our 18th year of marriage. And so I'm not as nice to him on the phone as I used to be, but it's true. We can lose the respect and the kindness and the courtesy that we used to show friends because we're just familiar. And so I say that as a warning that, I'm not saying that when you're meeting up friends and things like that, hey, Charlie, Charlie, what's up? Many of us are very informal with our friends, but some of us are mean. Like, you know, you meet them and you say, foolish boy, how are you? You know, and like, I think, you know, I believe in sowing and reaping. For me, my faith perspective inspires a lot of how I try to relate to people. And, you know, the Bible, for me as a Christian at least, teaches that you want your speech to be seasoned with salt. It needs to give grace to the hearer. And I think that that means everybody who hears you, including your spouse, including your friends, including people you have depth of relationship with. Like, is this giving grace to them? Is this, you know, and things like foolish boy or foolish girl or, you know, idiots, kwasia, you know, for those who aren't from Ghana on the call, that means fool in one of our local languages. I don't believe that that's scriptural, you know. So I personally bring my religion into this. And like, you know, what is the standard for relating to people? You know, the scriptures say, "Oh, people, nothing but love." And so there's something about kindness and gentleness and, you know, and one of my favorite scriptures, and I've been praying this over myself for years, is, you know, it says that wisdom's ways, the path of wisdom, are paths of pleasantness and peace. And that's what I pray over myself. Like, God, you know, whether a person works with me or not, whether, you know, like, I believe as long as I'm pleasant and peaceful, I'm walking in wisdom. And I just want to give that to everybody, including those nearest and dearest to me, because sometimes we forget, we're so familiar with them that sometimes we forget to be nice. So that's the last thing I'd say about friendships and close relationships. All right. So we've come to the end of session 1 of Polished Professionalism. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you've learned a lot. I hope you will apply these principles and start, you know, putting them to practice at work this week. I hope that you'll start, you know, showing people what you've learned, and people have to start saying, wow, this girl is amazing, or this guy is amazing, or this person, this colleague is amazing, because you've started to put into practice what you've learned here today. So please expect an email with your participant workbook that'll give you more notes to review and things that you can refer to for future. I've recorded this session for the benefit of those who weren't able to make it to the live call. I'll make it accessible to all of you as well for a 7-day period. I do all of these trainings under license by the Protocol School of Washington, and technically we're not allowed to share things digitally this way. So I am trusting you with the recordings for a 7-day period, with the hope that if you missed any portion of this, you could go back to it. It is for your personal use alone, please. So please desist sharing it with anyone who didn't pay to attend the class today, as a sign of respect for those who paid, but also so that I don't violate the terms of my license agreement with the Protocol School of Washington. So I look forward to seeing you again next week, same time, same place. You've got calendar invites, hopefully, that have the correct Zoom links. Sorry that I mixed it up earlier today, but hopefully I'll see you all again for our next class next week, Tuesday night. See you. Bye. Have a good rest of your night.